Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm not allowed to breathe, apparently.
Blake was anything to do with this movie, but
Blake was just complaining that I was breathing too loud into the microphone. Sorry.
Some of us have to edit this after.
Yeah, some of us.
And we're doing Dog Day Afternoon. This is part 2, our deep dive discussion. If you haven't seen this movie, it's awesome, and you should go check out the primer episode where we talk spoiler-free about this movie and all of the reasons why you should check it out. But this is not that episode. This is the full deep dive, spoiler-full discussion. So if you haven't seen this movie, highly recommend it. Go check out the previous episode.
Go check out the previous episode and then the movie.
Yeah. So where we usually start with this is in front of the camera, and we work our way back. And so why don't we just do that?
Yeah, sure. So Al Pacino.
The best performances of his entire career.
Yes.
The best performance.
I would say the best.
Yeah. So the movie opens with Sal and Sonny and one other character in the car, and they basically get out of the car and set up for this armed robbery of the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And right off the bat, things go horribly wrong. I don't know if we have to talk about every minor detail of how hilarious the opening 20 minutes are and how wrong they go, but some of the highlights include the third unnamed, because I don't remember his name.
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. The third armed robber deciding that he can't do it, Sonny, and he quits in the first minute of the robbery.
Essentially, yeah, and they just kind of let him go.
Yeah. It's kind of hilarious. Like, Sonny's reaction is one of my favorites of the entire film in this moment, and it's like one of my favorite quotes the entire movie is when they're talking, he's like, "I can't do it, Sonny," and Sonny's like, "Oh, fuck me!" Like,
yeah,
he's like basically almost like cries at that moment.
Yeah,
because right off the bat, things are not going right in this heist as one person dips.
And then they have to grab the keys from the security guard and actually let him out.
Yeah,
and then he's like, "Give me the keys." And he's like, "How am I supposed to get home?" He's like, "Take the subway. We need the car."
I love his reaction too, because it takes him a second to like process what the guy just says to him. Like, "You're kidding me, right?" Like, you're leaving the middle of this heist and you're complaining about not being able to get home easily.
Yeah, right? Like, it's so... I think my favorite individual moment is when he's putting spray paint on, like, the cameras.
Yes.
And there's one he can't reach, so he has to, like, grab a chair, stand on it, and, like, spray it.
The point of this is that the first 20 minutes are hilarious, ridiculous, and just everything goes wrong. Right up to the main point in which they go to get the money out of the bank, and there's nothing in there. There's like $1,600.
Yeah.
And they thought they were going to be pulling out like $200,000-$300,000 out of the bank, is what they were told when they set up this heist.
Right, but the person had come by earlier today and cleaned it all out, so that's all they had left.
Exactly.
And I love that moment, especially early on in the movie, because it just hammers home how futile everything is. Like, how futile this whole endeavor was, right?
Right.
Then after that, and then the police get involved, and it just becomes about survival.
Yes.
Right?
At that point in time. And that's a really interesting way to put it, too, because that is what the main characters also think about this as well, right? Like, in its very basic form, they're thinking about survival, because this is the 70s. This is, like, police brutality is at the forefront of people's minds. Like, there's a lot of mistrust. There's the Attica prison riots, which had just happened within the last year or so in the 70s, and so that's on a lot of people's mind, and there's a lot of fear about what the police are capable of, and also their ability to get away with things like this.
Right. So, and I think that leads to one of the most interesting aspects of the movie, at least for me, is that as this whole carnival forms around the bank, the media and, like, the civilians kind of start framing Sonny as this, like, hero.
Yeah.
This kind of, like, Robin Hood figure who's sticking it to the man.
Right.
And this is, again, where I think Pacino's performance really shines through, is that he's clearly surprised and baffled by the whole thing, but he's also kind of enjoying the attention, right?
Definitely.
I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when the news anchor calls him over the bank phone to interview
Right.
him, and the interview goes horribly wrong.
Because he's dropping F-bombs left, right, and center.
Right. And he's like, the news anchor's like, why did you rob this bank? And he's like, what kind of question is that? I needed the money.
Yeah.
He's like, no, why did you feel you needed to rob this bank? He's like, oh, listen to me, Mr. Anchorman. How much money do you make in a week?
Yeah, exactly.
And then he's like, Sonny, we're trying to keep... He's like, we're talking to you here. He's like, yeah, you're talking to me. Let's make this a conversation. And then at one point he just hangs up.
Right. Yeah. Well, the newscast actually hangs up on him, basically.
Right.
Of all the F-bombs and everything else that he's dropping while he's talking. But that's actually a really good and interesting part as well, because there's kind of a heroism to his character that, over the course of this heist really becomes apparent, because again, this is a time of inflation and a lot of societal pressures on people, and that's the point that Sonny makes on that call.
I think he literally even says in the interview with the newscaster, he's like, I got pressure. Or
yeah, and that's the whole point of the movie too, is like this deconstruction of what leads a person to rob a bank, especially someone who, as you said in the primer episode, there is intelligence behind some of Sonny's chaos and disorder.
And I think the opening does a really good job of demonstrating that. Like, there's that scene early on, like, midst of the bank robbery, where he grabs the manager and he's like, okay, open the vault. And the manager goes to put one key in and he's like, what? Hey, he's like, use the spot key. He's like, what, are you trying to sound the alarm? Do you think I'm stupid?
Right.
Like, and like, as a viewer, you're like, oh, okay. Like, and then there's a moment after that where he's robbing the registers and he's like, no, don't pull the money out like that. It'll trigger the alarm. You got to do this. And then he's like, they open one register and he's like, wow, are you kidding me? Like, this is counterfeit money. You're trying to mark me. Like,
right.
Yeah. So like, you're like, oh, he either worked at I think he literally says, I worked at a bank.
Yes.
So like he's, it builds enough intrigue to make you keep watching.
Yeah.
You're like,
exactly.
oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that kind of builds him up as well, in the sense that, yeah, like you said, like, even though there's all of these things happening, all of these pressures, it's kind of like what will Sonny do to get out of this next situation?
And again, there is sprinkles of like decency too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's hilarious when he tries to lock everybody up in the vault. The woman was just like, I have to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And he's like, what, are you kidding me? And he's like, all right, fine. Who else has to go to the bathroom?
Right. Yeah. It's a very orderly hostage-taking situation. Like, the hostages come to kind of, some of them even have a little bit of fun while they're stuck in here for like 12 to 14 hours with all of them.
Yeah. Or there's even that, like, there's this elderly security guard named Howard who has asthma. So he, like, immediately kind of collapses and, the police get involved. They're like, okay, well, so one of their early deals, they're like, we'd want you to release one hostage. And he's instantly like, okay, well, let's get Howard out of here because he's having an asthma attack. Yeah. Right?
And he basically tells them that he's got a bunch of women with him. He doesn't really say that he's got men with him. And so that does throw a wrench, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah. That leads to the first big problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I also really appreciate about the movie, is that the bank robbery goes tits up so quickly. But then we see that, like, the whole police barricade situation is also incredibly mismanaged.
Yeah, like, right from the get-go, the circus just comes to town. Like, all of these spectators are just there still. Like, they don't clear everybody off of the street. Like, if you think about today, there would be nobody within like 100, like a kilometer of this. Like, everybody would have been kicked out. Like, there's people sitting in their homes, like in their apartment buildings, watching this happen across the street and stuff.
Yeah, and there's that great moment kind of later on where, like, the SWAT team tries to break in through the back door, so he shoots out the back window, and then him and what's his name? Moretti. Him and Moretti start yelling at each other. Moretti's like, what are you doing? Why are you shooting out the back window? And he's like, oh, you got guys coming in the back. And Moretti's like, no, I don't. And it's like, It turns out Moretti doesn't even know what the police are doing behind the building. Right.
Yeah.
And
that's one of the great, like, improvised scenes of the movie. Like, that's pure improvisation from both of them.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it.
And you can feel the tension between the two of them, because neither of them knows what the other person is going to say either, because they're both just reacting off of each other.
It does give their performances like a certain rawness that really helps this movie age well. Yeah. What did you think of Moretti? Did you think he was kind of an okay guy?
Yeah, he was doing his best, but he wasn't the police sergeant that they needed at that point in time. Like he's definitely out of his element. This is beyond the scope of his capabilities.
I think it makes him a good foil to Sonny in that they're both two people who are in way over their heads.
Yes.
There's also a great moment when Sonny periodically leaves the bank to talk to Moretti, right? And there's a great moment where the boyfriend of one of the women who's been taken hostage runs forward and like tackles him to the ground and starts punching him.
Right.
And they have to get him out of there. And then Sonny's all like, how did he get through the barricade?
Yeah.
Like,
like, how did you mess this up?
Yeah. And Moretti's just so frustrated.
Yeah. Well, and that even kind of going back to what you were saying about, the initial part of the movie where they trade one of the hostages and it's what's his name again?
Howard, the old guy.
Yeah. They immediately think that he's another one of the bank robbers. And part of it as well is probably like,
it's a miscommunication.
Yeah, it's a big miscommunication because they don't know there's a guy in there, and you believe it as well that like the police would just suddenly like grab this guy and like
handcuff him,
and like they're pretty hands on grabby with him, and like that whole scene's pretty gross, like because it's believable.
Yeah, and even Moretti is like disgusted.
Yeah,
he's like, get off him, like come on.
Yeah, and like they don't know who this guy is at this point in time, and that's when like. He's mad. He's like, "What are you doing?" Like that's one of the hostages. Like he's obviously unwell too, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where really the crowd kind of is instantly won over because he's screaming at Moretti, like Sonny's screaming at Moretti, like, what are you doing? Like trying to like get him off of them. And then there's the other woman,
Sylvie.
Yeah.
Sylvia.
Yeah, Sylvia's like yelling, like that's one of the hostages, kind of thing. Like, what are you doing? And that's when the crowd is won over, right? Like when the crowd is starting to be won over by Sonny and his antics. And then at that point as well, he starts screaming out the Attica as like his
yeah,
which is a really good moment as well, kind of thing to get them on his side. It's also a little bit like armor on him because, like he's so afraid that the police are just going to gun him down like on the streets in front of everybody that to win everybody over like that is just, it's such a intelligent way to just make sure that you're not become a martyr, essentially. Like he's basically like pre-martyred himself so that the police won't kill him.
Yeah, he really becomes a headache for the police.
Yeah. And all the while, and this is a really interesting little piece of this too, is all the while the FBI is there immediately and just like they're spectating. Like the police are like, we got this, like don't worry about this. It's every 20 minutes or so you just see him in the background just kind of spectating, watching this, like unbelievable how this is kind of unfolding.
And I will say that FBI guy kind of like he's a very intimidating presence.
Yes.
There is that scene later on where he goes up to Sonny. He's like, I want to come in. He's like, I want to see what's going on.
Right.
And Sonny's like, well, you got a lot of confidence. Like, how do you know I didn't slit their throats? And he's just like, I want to see.
Right.
And then he comes in and he looks around and he sort of basically says like, this is all going to be over soon. And he's like, and you need to watch your friend Sal because throughout the whole movie, Sal is starting to crack under the pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we know really early on that Sal is definitely not okay in the head. Like he's got some things going on. He's definitely a pretty disturbed guy. Like he at one point, like Sonny says that he's gonna, I'm
gonna start throwing hostages out the door, like one by one,
throwing bodies out the door.
Bodies out the door. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sal pulls him to the side and he says, like, like, were you serious about that? Because I'm ready to gun down anybody in any given moment here.
It's kind of funny because when he first pulls aside, he's like, are you serious about that? And I'm like, oh, he's gonna object. And he's like, no, like, let's do it. Yeah. Like, let's start.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then, like later on, Sonny kind of breaks down the fact that he's like, are we still good? Like, you told me that if this wasn't successful, that we had a suicide pact and we were gonna kill each other if this didn't work. And he's like, is that still the plan? And Sonny obviously has definitely just told him that. Like, I don't think Sonny's prepared to die at any point in this film.
No.
And Sonny's like working his way through this, trying to figure out how they're going to get out of this. And even like FBI especially recognize the issue with having Sal in this. Like, they can work with Sonny, and they kind of know long term how that they're going to get Sonny. But with Sal, he becomes like the question, the problem in this whole situation.
And that's a great way this movie builds tension. Is like, I kept thinking like, Sonny is not just juggling the police and the hostages; he's also trying to appease Sal the whole movie, right?
Yep.
And like, Sal gradually began showing like, there's kind of that great moment later on when, you know, he has kind of that conversation with Sylvia where he's just like, you shouldn't smoke, like, your body's a temple.
Right.
And he's just like, you know, your body's a temple for Jesus Christ. And she's like, are you serious? Like, you're a Christian, but you're robbing banks?
Right.
Yeah.
And you genuinely, because, you know, this character hasn't heard everything that Sal has said, you're genuinely a little bit afraid because you don't know if Sal's going to just shoot her right there and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really interesting, scary performance, like quiet, scary performance.
That's almost one of the most chilling scenes of the whole movie is just her conversation with Sonny.
Yeah.
Not Sonny, Sal. I actually liked Sylvia a lot. I actually thought that
Yes.
was Jamie Lee Curtis at first, but it's not. It's not.
No. I guess Sonny is the focal point of the film, but like, should we discuss his character in a little bit more detail and break him down?
Well, we should probably talk about the big twist halfway through that we've been alluding to.
Yes.
That he's actually a gay man
Yes.
robbing a bank so that he can pay for his partner's gender reassignment surgery.
Yes. And you know what? The movie does a really good job of completely setting this up to be like his wife and kids. Like, that we actually are expecting that his wife and our kids are going to show up at this bank at any time.
And we've met the wife and kids briefly
Yes.
earlier on.
Yes.
So
they have a conversation. They have a conversation with his parents at some point. Actually, when you rewatch this movie, pay attention to the opening credits, the rolling credits of the film, because there's a shot of, you know, just all of the mundane things happening in New York at this point in time. There's actually a quick shot of her walking with the kids down the street, which I caught on this watch.
Oh,
Yes.
very clever.
Yes. But yeah, so the whole movie's kind of building up that they're going to, you know, reconnect. She's going to show up and they're going to try to use her to get Sonny out of this. And then the twist happens that Sonny actually wants to see Leon, his other wife.
His lover. Yeah. Yeah. And their whole conversation, like, I was actually, like, I was watching it recently and I was like, this is a very well acted, well done conversation between...
Honestly, that's the highlight of the movie for me is their conversation and reconciling with each other.
I don't even know if they reconcile, but like, you believe like, oh, this is a couple that's on the rocks.
Yeah.
Like, it's so believable.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, there's a little bit of lead up to this as well, because Leon doesn't want to speak to Sonny because of the way Leon and Sonny's relationship has gone up until this point. Like, Leon's almost afraid of Sonny at this point because of Sonny's outbursts, and Sonny says like he's got a lot of pressures on him, and again, like we talked about this in the primer episode, you kind of feel for Sonny because of all of the stuff in his life going on and just all of the different pressures and pulls from all of these different people and places kind of thing. It's something that as an adult you can really connect with.
To a point, yeah. And then, Leon is just kind of like, I want to go back. I'm going to go back to the hospital. Like, the doctors there are nice and they're going to help me.
Yeah.
And like, blah, 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 blah. And they don't, I don't really think they even reconcile. It's more just like, okay, I'll see you around, Leon. Okay, I'll see, like, in your, you know, he says like, I'll see you around, Leon. He's like, yeah, in your dream, I'll see you in my dreams.
Yeah.
And then he has this final conversation with his wife. So the deal is he left his wife for Leon. And then they have a conversation, and it is even more heartbreaking in a weird way.
Yeah.
Like, Angie, his wife, is just so frantic, and like, he's trying to be nice to her, but he's clearly just kind of frustrated with her.
Right, because he's saying that she's not listening to him because she's in this panic, hysteria, basically, over him and their situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like, you can see that they're obviously not a wealthy family. Like, they've got this bunk bed for the kids. Like, their house is, you know...
It's like a shitty apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very small and cramped, and it looks like 100 degrees in there kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and then so
Which we didn't even talk about yet why this movie is called Dog Day Afternoon.
the Dog Days of Summer?
Yeah,
exactly. Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's the end of summer, like when it's really hot in August kind of thing, and you almost don't even want to be inside, but being outside is even worse kind of thing.
There's that great moment where the police cut the air conditioning to the bank, and for the rest of the movie everyone is just sweating bullets.
Yeah, getting progressively sweatier.
Yeah, if you like sweaty human beings, you're gonna love this movie.
Sonny's situation is really what carries this movie.
You know what moment though I did admire though is so Mulvaney, this kind of older manager, he is diabetic and he starts kind of having kind of like a diabetic fit later on in the movie. So Sonny gets a doctor to come in, and the doctor basically says like we should get him out of here to get him looked at, and then Sonny is actually willing to let Mulvaney go. Like, all right, get out of here. And then Mulvaney just says like, I'm fine, I just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
Like he's unwilling to leave his employees. And there's that great moment where he just says like, he says to Sonny like, you're not some angel of human mercy. He's like, I wish you'd never walked into my fucking bank.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, yeah, this movie is sympathetic towards Sonny, but it's not condoning his behavior either.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Going back a little bit, kind of the complex relationship this movie has with the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, I guess we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Because the reveal that Sonny is actually gay and why he's robbing the bank in the first place caught me fully off guard.
Yes.
And like, it's shocking in 2023, but like it must have been mind-blowing in 1977 or whenever this came out.
Right. It portrays things in a pretty complicated way, right? Because even right off the bat, like as they're talking about it on the news broadcast when it becomes announced in the movie, they say essentially that, there are people of the community who are, upset and feeling like they're being portrayed like pretty badly here because obviously, you don't want to be associated with a bank robber.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, there's people who are supporting him, just blindly supporting him because he's part of the gay community.
Don't they have signs that say like out of the closet and into the something?
Yeah.
It was clever. I just can't remember it.
Yeah, and so like there's
out of the closet into the streets or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like the big community that comes to support him kind of thing, and like, there's a lot of complicated thoughts about that, and like, about being part of a tribe essentially, and sticking up for people even though what the people are doing isn't a good thing, right?
And watching this movie, I was shocked by how, and someone can argue, I'm not a great authority on this, and feel free to argue with me on this, people in the comments, but like this movie seems almost kind of really ahead of its time in terms of how,
especially like Leon and Sonny's relationship.
Yeah, like
right?
how maturely it handles this subject matter, right? Like, okay, so when Leon is explaining that he needed gender reassignment surgery, one of the cops snickers.
Right.
But like, it's not treated as a joke, right? That cop is just an asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and one of the cops actually calls him out on it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Jess actually said while we were watching it this time, she was like, do you think the cop in the background who's giggling like is supposed to be giggling right now? And I was like, I 100% think he's supposed to be giggling right now. And then right after that he gets shut down for being an idiot,
essentially,
and not being sympathetic to or empathetic to somebody's situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting look at all of that, and I think that some people are going to be upset by the portrayals and other people are going to...
I was trying to think, like, if I was a member of this community, would I appreciate this representation or would I not? And I can't really answer that.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, he's a bank robber. On the other hand, like, again, that scene with him and Leon is... like, it's not...
it's profound almost. Like,
it's not a joke. It's not comic relief. It's just... these are two people with a very complicated romantic relationship.
Yeah, and like I said, it's my favorite scene in the whole movie, I think, is just their conversation on the phone. I am completely, 100% gripped their whole conversation to what they're saying.
Yeah, really. And that's a testament to both actors, Al Pacino and
Chris Sarandon.
Prince Humperdinck.
Yeah, Prince Humperdinck.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite Chris Sarandon performance now.
I guess it would have to be, yeah. Gonna have to rewatch The Princess Bride, though.
Oh, we'll do that on the podcast for sure at some point. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Fuck yeah. I'm thinking about Inigo Montoya.
Prepare to die. Oh, you know what? We didn't even talk about this quote, but this is one of my favorite quotes of the whole movie as well, is when Sonny brings the FBI agent into the bank, and Sonny says to him, like, you'd like to kill me. I bet you would.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheldon says, I wouldn't like to kill you, but I will if I have to.
Yeah.
And Sonny says, it's your job, right? The guy who kills me, I hope he does it because he hates my guts, not because it's a job. That's a really good line in this film.
Can we talk about the ending too? Like,
yeah.
So the last half hour, Sonny gets Sylvia or one of the other women to basically dictate a final letter,
right?
His last will and testament.
Yeah.
And then they all get in the limousine that's been provided. And there's that great moment where there's like the black driver who's kind of acting silly,
like all goofy, and like,
and then Sonny's like, hey, I want him to be the driver.
Yeah, he sniffs out that guy's got to be like some sort of plant, right? Like that.
Yeah, and that actually took me by surprise. I was like, oh, like at first I was like, oh, they're just pulling this random side character to the movie. Then I was like, oh, he's a cop. Like, and Sonny sniffed it out, right? And then they all get in the car, and I forget who it is. The FBI
agent.
The FBI agent. He's like, Sal's sitting directly behind him, pointing the gun at the back of his head. He's like, Sal, could you please, like, point your gun up in the air? Because, like, if we hit a bump, I don't want your gun to discharge, right?
Yeah, blow my brains out.
Yeah, and Sal is pretty amenable to that. He's like, oh, okay. And then, like, you know, they go through the streets, and, like, the civilians are, like, pounding on the car door, and, like, the car's bumping, and, like, at a couple of different points, Sal lowers his gun, and then raises it, and then lowers it again. So, like, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, what's gonna happen? And like, I was pretty sure Sonny was gonna die just because of he has a final conversation with his wife.
Yep. There's a finality to a lot of his character.
He has two conversations with his two wives, and then he has a final conversation with his mom, which is also heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. And then they all get in the car, and then, you know, it keeps coming back to Sal raising and lowering his gun, and there's all these tight close-up shots of everyone in the car. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay. And then they get to the airport, and the plane comes around. Oh, yeah, Sonny's like, oh, hey, is there food on the plane? Like, I was hoping there's food on the plane. And then again, the FBI is like, oh, Sal, just, can you raise your gun again? Remember? Yeah. And then, again, the plane's coming, and, like, I'm just like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, I was, like, pretty sure Sonny was going to die. Like, how is this going to resolve itself? Turns out the FBI had a gun planted in the car. They shoot Sal, and then they point their guns at Sonny.
Right.
And that's how it ends. Yeah. It's a very, very dramatic, very quick.
Yeah. It's a blunt ending.
It's a very blunt. It's very effective, but it's very blunt.
It's very dark. It's almost so dark that it doesn't fit some of the silliness of the rest of the movie, like some of the comedy of the movie.
The movie does become very somber towards the final act, which I did actually kind of appreciate.
Yeah, and I think it does a good job of that. I think that might be the reason why this movie hasn't necessarily maintained itself inside of the zeitgeist for so long, is I think with an ending like that, you know, the movie loses a little bit of rewatchability with
you know what?
kind of an ending.
You know what, though? Like, there's actually one moment towards the end that actually shocked me in how touched I was. Like, so they need to pick one hostage to leave before they get on the plane, and they pick Maria, who was previously hiding in the bathroom.
Right.
And it's her boyfriend that tackled Al Pacino, Sonny, outside. And just as she gets out of the car, she goes, oh, Sal, like, I know you said you've never been on a plane before, but don't worry, like, it's going to be okay. Right. And then she takes off her necklace and gives it to him.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and I'm like, I was deeply touched by that moment. For whatever reason, I was just like, oh, like, you know, something about that moment really caught me off guard and pulled at my heartstrings.
Cool. Yeah.
And then Sal gets shot.
And then Sal gets shot. And
right. But then, as Al Pacino is being pressed into the car and, like, Sal's body is being wheeled away, there's that kind of sweet moment where he looks up and he sees all the hostages walking away and they're all safe, and like a little smile kind of tugs on the corners of his lips.
Yeah, like he feels a little bit relieved that it's over himself, right?
I think he's relieved that nobody got hurt.
Yes.
Despite everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, is Sonny a good guy? Probably not, but there is that weird humanity to him that kind of pulls you to him.
Yeah, for sure.
By the way, imagine robbing a bank and Al Pacino plays you in a movie.
Well, actually, the whole story behind that's kind of interesting. Like, we're going to get into that, but this happened in 1972, and then Life magazine wrote an article about it, like a full, few page article about this, and then they bought the rights to that article to make this movie. Life magazine described John, the actual heist guy, as looking like a main actor type character who would be played by either Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman.
Huh.
And so
funny.
Yeah, so Al Pacino actually was offered this role first, and he turned it down because of, again, being a character actor, not wanting to be in this character who's very high anxiety, very stressed out, and being pulled by all these directions. Didn't want to have to go into that after portraying
Michael Corleone. Yeah.
He ended up going back and accepting the role because he heard that Dustin Hoffman was potentially going to take the role instead, and that was his main rival at this point in time in Hollywood.
Yep. A lot of the greatest movies were because of leading men measuring their dicks against each other.
Stallone and Arnold.
Yeah,
classic.
That was the next decade.
Yeah, I think that the movie does a good job with the closing as well. Like, it's very abrupt, but it also, they don't get away with it, and that's what actually happened. Like,
yeah, I was trying to imagine how it was going to end. Like, maybe there were cops waiting in the plane or something,
right?
And his whole plan of like, we're going to get a jet and we're going to fly to Algeria,
right?
And like, even Leon says to him, like, what are you going to do in Algeria? Like,
yeah.
You
don't even have money at this point.
Yeah, like it's all a farce and a pipe dream, right? But he's so committed to it.
Right.
He even says, he's like, I'll write to his mom, I'll write you from Algeria. Yeah.
Well, and I think part of it is he's trying to, sell himself on this. Like, he I think he knows that things aren't going to get away, but I think he's also a little bit of himself afraid of what Sal is capable of, because there are some allusions to the fact that maybe he's made a deal to get rid of Sal. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree with that point of view, but that is definitely some thoughts that people have had is, did he make a deal with the FBI to rat Sal out to survive and maybe take a smaller prison sentence?
I didn't get that vibe at all, but
like, there's a point in time when the FBI say to him, like, hey, we're going to take care of Sal, don't worry about him.
Yeah, there was that. I thought that was more the FBI just saying to him, like, look, we can tell you're the reasonable one, but that guy is a loose cannon, so deal with it.
Right.
Or we'll deal with it, I mean.
Yeah.
And they do deal with it.
Oh, definitely. But there's definitely, I think a lot of people see that as him potentially making a deal or having already made a deal with the FBI. So that's just one way to look at it.
Interesting. Okay.
There's a lot of like little details in this that I think, going back and rewatching this, you're going to notice, like Maria being caught in the bathroom in the first 15 minutes is like actually at the 15-minute mark of the film, where they're like, oh, Maria's having her 15-minute break.
Oh yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, so they actually timed that really well. Let's talk sequels, prequels, and reboots. So what we're actually going to talk about, again, we already mentioned the Life article, but the true story that this is based on.
I would like to know more about the true story, yeah.
If you wanted to go back, the article is called The Boys in the Bank. P.F. Kluge and Thomas More wrote it. I think that John said that the story of what happened, he said it's about 30% accurate to what actually happened. The bigger points of the film happened, like the fact that they robbed the bank, the fact that it goes horribly wrong, the fact that the police completely mismanaged the situation, and eventually Sal was shot at the airport. All of the major plot points of the film, like Leon being his wife and kind of some of that situation was real, and the reason why he was doing it was real, trying to get the reassignment surgery for Leon. I just was reading about this, what Sal's motivation was for the kidnapping, or it's not for the kidnapping, for the bank heist. He wanted the money to essentially get his sisters out of foster care because his mom was a horrible alcoholic.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Touching.
Yeah, so I mean, even his character had some, proper reasons for getting out of there. But Sal was actually quite known to the police in real life. Like, that's part of the reason why they kind of knew him as a loose cannon, because he'd already been charged a dozen or so times for different types of robberies. And
Okay, so he was like a career criminal,
yes,
sort of.
Yes, he was only, I believe, like 19 at the time.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he was
Young.
really young. Yeah, and so John Cazale was actually originally not supposed to play his character because he was quite a bit older in
I
this.
think he was like 39 when this movie was shot or something.
But John Cazale has kind of there's a bit of a youthfulness to him,
A boyishness, yeah.
exactly. So I think he was right for the character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, what eventually happens, like with Leon, who actually is Eden, was her name after the reassignment surgery, because she actually got paid. Like, I think in the end of the movie, it says that
she got the surgery. Yeah,
she got the surgery from like John's, I don't know, money from whatever. But, she actually got the money because they paid John for the rights to the story, and John paid for her reassignment surgery.
So it was a real love after all.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I think they divorced technically after the movie, like when he was in prison, because he did end up going to prison for 20 years. Or he served, I think he only served 5 of the 20 years, but he ended up going.
And he still paid for the surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And so Liz died of AIDS in 1987, unfortunately.
Ouch.
John died of cancer in 2006.
So he lived quite a while.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep. Effects and filming. So I think that this is actually really interesting, and this is actually kind of even related maybe to Killers of the Flower Moon, is the perspective of the film and what the movie is really about. The writer, Frank Pearson, almost actually dropped out of writing the screenplay for this, but he actually, part of the reason why he didn't is because he spent his advance money and couldn't give it back.
Like every writer in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my own.
So he was doing his research on this and couldn't figure out how to like tell this story. And basically he interviewed a bunch of people who were connected to Sonny and realized that everybody had different contradictory stories of who Sonny was. Like, everybody thought of Sonny as a different person. He basically realized that, at his core, Sonny was the kind of guy who would be like, say, like, I'll take care of you. Like, I'll be the guy who makes you happy, like, kind of like schmoozer kind of guy. But there's all these different contradictory ideas of who that Sonny was, or who John was in real life. And so that's where he took the story, is like trying to peel the layers back of this character.
That's very smart.
Yeah.
And you know what? I feel like if a writer was trying to make a story about one of us, or anyone, you'd probably find many, many, many different versions of your subject depending on who you were talking to.
Oh, definitely.
That's what's interesting about human beings.
Yeah.
In the way we present around different people.
For sure. And actually, one other thing I forgot I was going to say too is Real Life John said that the thing that they messed up the most in the telling of the story was that his real wife, what was her name?
Angie?
Yeah. So his real wife was actually like portrayed kind of dirty. Like, they did her kind of dirty.
She's kind of portrayed as like hysterical, and they make a big point about her weight. Yep. And all that stuff.
Yeah, and John kind of regrets how they did her in the movie, because she wasn't like that at all. Like, he didn't have any real ill will towards her or anything. So, and they actually got divorced like 2 years before he ended up marrying Leon as well in real life.
Oh, so like in the movie, they kind of imply that he just left his wife and kids. For Leon.
Yeah. And that was more, movie Hollywood magic kind of thing than anything.
We're Hollywooding it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, Al Pacino almost like, I think they shot this over like 7 weeks or something, but he only slept a couple hours a night and took cold showers, so that basically like he just had an exhausted look about him the entire time that they were filming.
Hey, can you imagine only sleeping 2 hours for 7 weeks?
Well, he took a couple-year break after this movie and just did some Broadway type stuff because of how exhausting and emotionally stressful this role was, and like, again, coming off of Marco Corleone as well. So this one took quite a toll on him to perform.
I guess, yeah, and you can see it. And like, hey, who am I to argue? It's his best performance.
Yeah. Sidney Lumet didn't watch any of the real life story, like from the perspective of the news anchors or anything like that. Like, he decided just to go in and like read the story and then interpret it the way he
Do it
wanted
like
to
a
interpret
story,
it.
yeah. And that was probably for the best.
Yeah, well, and he even considered at one point, because they show in the broadcast a picture of Leon during their wedding, and he decided not to use the real life footage of their wedding because he found that wedding footage was very over the top, and he didn't want to lose the audience, like
Distracting, maybe.
Yeah, and he didn't, like, especially that time period, right? Like, less accepting of an audience at that point in time. So I think keeping it tasteful and like, their relationship is very important to the film, but again, not going over the top with it to try to get some empathy out of an audience that might not have as much empathy now or as they would now.
Yeah, it's even kind of shocking that this movie is as mature about that subject matter as it was.
Yeah.
Considering the time frame it was made in.
Yeah. So I mentioned how much improvisation happened in this film. There's a few moments that I do want to mention about some of the highlights of that improvisation. When Sal says Wyoming to the question of what country do you want to fly to?
Oh, wow, that was hilarious.
That was completely improvised. Al Pacino had no idea he was going to say that. So Al Pacino's reaction of like sitting there, like contemplating what the hell he just said, like you could see it in his face. He kind of like almost laughs, and then he's like, "Really? You just said that? Like, oh my god, this
Wyoming.
is what I'm this bank with." Yeah, that's improvised. The Attica chant is improvised, which is like one of the big moments of the movie. And actually, like, the police sergeant, like his actor, had no idea that he was going to start doing that. So his reaction of just like complete like
bewilderment,
no idea what to do, is exactly what he was just thinking in that moment. The entirety of the phone conversation between Al Pacino and Chris Sarandon is improvised. And
really?
Yes.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and they actually did 2 takes of it, even though the first take of it, they felt like, I don't think they took any of the second take of it, but they really liked what happened with the first take and where their conversation went and everything. They just did the second take so that, because Sidney Lumet saw just how much it took out of Al Pacino, like it just completely exhausted Al Pacino. Like, if you've been in those kind of situations in your life where just something happens or you have to have one of those.
You have a difficult conversation with your partner that you've been dreading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it takes a toll on you. And so having to do that twice, like, and then the film is mostly actually shot in chronological order. So shooting that in later in the movie really, adds to his whole appearance, right? His whole vibe.
That whole sequence too, it's like he has a difficult phone call with Leon, then a difficult phone call with Angie.
Yeah.
And while this is going on, the doctors are taking a look at Mulvaney. And then after those 2 incredibly difficult conversations, he's just sitting there exhausted. And the doctor's just standing there like, so we should get this guy out of here.
Right.
And you see the look on the doctor's face, like, I really don't want to interrupt you right now.
Right.
Like,
well, and then it caps it all off after with his mom showing up.
Oh, yeah, and that too, yeah.
Which is just that extra level of stress, right?
Mm-hmm. You were a beautiful baby!
The other improvised scene, like I said before, is after Sonny shoots the back window because he thinks that people are coming in through the back door. That actually happened in real life, as a side note. That was actually something that happened. But the whole interaction between the sergeant and Sonny is completely improvised between the two of them. And like you were saying before, feels like they really are just trying to figure
really
things out.
at odds. Maybe that's the secret. If you're shooting a movie where it's important that characters aren't communicating properly, or one side doesn't know what the other side is doing, maybe that's when you do get them to improvise, because it makes it their performances seemed very raw and real the whole movie. So hey, actors, director, right? Sidney Lumet, he knew what he was fucking doing.
My boy Sidney Lumet.
Is he still alive?
No, he passed away in 2007-ish. His last film is with Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
I think I've heard of it.
2007, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman and Ethan Hawke. And it's supposed to be a good movie. I haven't seen it myself yet, but it's on my list. I believe it's streaming on Prime, actually.
I like Ethan Hawke
still.
and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, two absolute haymakers. That was Sidney Lumet's last movie, and I believe he passed away. Oh, passed away in 2011.
Okay, so he had 3 or 4 years to just relax after that.
Yeah.
And then he died.
I mean, he was doing what he loved right up until the end, basically. Like, he made 50 movies in 50 years.
Good for him.
He was a prominent TV director before he started making movies.
Oh, crap.
Yeah.
So he was a workhorse.
Oh, yeah.
I admire that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've always thought, like, when my books take off, how much money do I need to make before I stop creating?
Hmm?
But I hope that I'm one of those creators where I just keep going.
Yep.
Right up until I die.
I think that's pretty commendable to be able to love what you do. I think that
after over the course of decades, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, even that. But I think, a lot of people, the reality is a job's a job for a lot of people.
Sure.
And it's pretty commendable that these types of people can find something that they're super passionate about, but they're also very good at.
Also, like, I don't know, like, I did 1 semester of advanced filmmaking where I made a documentary, and, like, I can tell you just from my limited experience, it is exhausting and stressful.
Yeah.
So being willing to go through that in your 70s and 80s and 90s in Clint Eastwood's case, like, that is commendable.
Yeah. No, I've got Sidney Lumet's book back there, Making Movies, and I haven't read it yet, but it's probably one of the next ones I'll read. Maybe after I'll read your book.
Well, maybe before you should read my book.
Oh, this was actually a comment that John made about the robbery. He said that Al Pacino using the white handkerchief to signal, like,
oh yeah, that handkerchief,
parlay, basically. He said that he would have never done that because it would have felt like surrender using the white flag.
I guess so.
Yeah, it was just like one of his critiques with the film. So
people have very odd critiques.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's him critiquing his life, right? So
I guess, you know what? Actually, if, like, somebody made a movie about me and I saw it, I'd be like, actually. Like,
yeah, he said that he thought that Al Pacino and Chris Sarandon did outstanding performances of him and Leon.
Huh.
So,
well, good for him.
That were the
good for them.
highlights.
Good for them.
Yeah. We quickly talked about this, but we didn't really talk about this in all that much detail. The scene where he's dictating his will.
Yes.
That was actually the entire reason why Sidney Lumet wanted to do this film, was for that scene.
Really?
They actually almost cut that scene because Frank Pearson felt that scene didn't fit the pacing of the rest of the movie. And so they ended up actually adding in a few extra parts into the movie, some, like, slower moments into the film, just to kind of make it feel
oh, really?
place. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which I think the slow moments actually work really effectively in the film. Like, I was thinking on this watch, right before they start shooting up the back of the back door, it's kind of like a quiet moment. Like, everybody's kind of, like, a little bit more relaxed. Like, all of the hostages have kind of, like, eased into this situation and everything. And then that big moment happens. And there's kind of a few other moments like that in the film that I actually thought were really good at. It was almost the opposite of some of the other movies that we've watched, where it's like tension building and then release, where it's like tension, things are kind of quieting down, boom, something.
Boom, yeah.
So I thought that those additions of those slower moments was actually quite effective in the film.
Yeah, and even some of the slower moments aren't, like, that conversation between Sal and Sylvia is actually one of the most disquieting moments in the whole movie.
Right.
Like, and that's a slower scene.
Yeah.
Like,
definitely.
so it works.
Yeah. The last effective filming note that I have in here is on the lighting, the cinematography of the film. They only used the real life lighting that was available to them. This is a film not shot with all of the extra stuff because they wanted it to feel like reality.
It does look naturalistic.
Yeah.
I actually do that opening montage with all the shots of, like, just the city and, like, the Doberman rooting around the trash. I do remember thinking, like, oh, is this like a documentary? Like, what is this?
Right. It's a pretty great opener. And I'm going to get into score now, but this song that they used in the opening credits is Amarina by Elton John.
Huh.
Pretty damn good song. I was listening to it today.
I'll have to listen to it after.
Yeah, it's great. That's actually the only song that they have in the film. There's not much else to say about the score because it's, a film that's biographical film.
This is
like,
another movie where I did not even notice a score.
because there is none, Michael. That's what I'm getting at.
Oh.
That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Oh!
There's no score. It was just Amarina in the beginning.
Oh.
And that's it. There's nothing. It's completely quiet in the background.
Huh. So
Other than, the sounds of everything going on.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is a very clever choice.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice.
I would have thought you would have noticed that, but
Yes. Hey, this movie's quiet.
Legacy, so I said before, it had 6 Oscar nominations. Those 6 Oscars were Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Screenplay, Best Film Editing. So I will say, nominated for 6 Oscars, only one won. The other 5 all went to One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest.
You know what? That's a movie I haven't actually seen.
Neither have I. So
Okay.
we need to do it on the podcast.
Yeah, I guess so.
What do you think, out of all of those major award categories, which one do you think that this movie won for?
I wasn't listening. List them off again.
Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Screenplay, Best Film Editing.
Okay, best original screenplay for sure.
Yes. That's what it was.
Well, best actor for Al Pacino. Probably best director. See, I haven't really seen one.
You really didn't listen to anything I just said.
What?
I said that it didn't win any award except for one of them.
Well, you said which one do you think it should? Which ones do you think it should have won?
Oh, no, I said which one do you think it did win?
Okay, so I was half listening, Blake, and I got it right too. So
Okay, yes. So, okay, well, I mean, not having seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's kind of a weird discussion of, like, what should have won, but, like...
I did think that was weird, but I mean...
Yeah, Al Pacino's performance is fantastic, but not only is his performance fantastic, like, Chris Sarandon's performance
Everybody's
is
yeah.
incredible. The Sergeant's performance is great. John Cazale's performance is very noteworthy. I honestly don't have a critique about this movie. It's just a good movie.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, it's like we said in the previous episode, I have no complaints. There's a lot of movies where I'm just like, oh, this was kind of slow, or this was unclear, or I didn't care much for this. This whole movie was a banger.
Yeah. Start to finish. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I can say is that because the ending is so blunt and, like, dark, is that it does dampen a little bit the rewatchability of it, but I still enjoyed it this time again.
I don't even know if I would call that a con. I just think that's the way the story had to end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a story about bank robbers. What did you think was going to happen?
Well, and it's rooted in reality, and that's what happened in real life.
Also that. Also, are we really that sad that Sal's dead? Come on.
Well, I'm about to say something really sad in the fact that John Cazale died only a couple of years after this, and 5 movies in, and the reason why he died was of cancer, because he was a chain smoker.
Okay, touche, Blake.
So it also makes the scene where he has the conversation about smoking,
cigarettes. Yeah, that is a little prophetic.
Yeah, a little bit more depressing as well.
Uncomfy.
Yeah, exactly. Other legacy bits to this. So they actually use this film as, or the real life incident as police training about what not to do in hostage situations.
That is so funny.
And how to deal with crowds, and not how to deal with crowds, because as we see in the film, like, the police just have absolutely no control over the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Al Pacino collapsed during this and had to be hospitalized, and that again is why he decided to stop doing films after this, is because of the physical and emotional toll that this movie took on him.
He collapsed, like he fainted.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never fainted before. Have you fainted?
Yes.
Okay. We'll talk after the podcast.
I think so. But Al Pacino, this is the 4th year in a row that he was nominated for Best Actor.
Wow.
Starting with The Godfather, and then Serpico, which is another Sidney Lumet Al Pacino film, and then The Godfather Part 2, and then this one. So 4-year run of being nominated. Pretty impressive.
Probably his most impressive streak.
Yeah, it is his most impressive streak, I would say.
Yeah.
This is one of Robert Ebert's great movies. Gene Siskel rated this 4 out of 4 as well, notably.
Yeah.
So this is one of the few movies those two agreed on.
I feel like they agreed on, like, the truly great movies.
Yeah, like most of them.
Except for Silence of the Lambs,
yeah.
apparently.
Gotta bring that one up again. Stick it to Gene Siskel one last time.
Huh. Have you ever seen the documentary Life Itself about Roger Ebert?
No, I haven't.
It's a very good documentary. I'd recommend it to everyone. And it gets into his relationship with Gene Siskel.
Cool.
It's very touching. I like it a lot.
I have listened to a podcast called Gene and Siskel, which goes into their whole life and their experiences together. And I really found it touching as well, so I'm sure I'd really enjoy that documentary.
Okay.
Can you name John Cazale's 5 nominated movies?
The Godfather, The Deer Hunter, The Godfather Part 2, this movie. I got 3.
You got 4.
I got 4. What's number 5?
Conversation.
Okay, never heard of it.
Neither have I.
Cool. What a conversation.
It was, yeah, we will do it at some point. It looks like a good film. I have it saved on our list of movies, dude. It's a Francis Ford Coppola film. That's why I knew it.
Oh, okay.
It's Gene Hackman. That's who it is.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. Personal reviews and the partner factor. You want to go first?
I really like this movie. I would be surprised if it's not in my top 5 of 2023.
Cool. Yep.
Didn't watch this with Emily, but I'll probably show it to her at some point.
Yeah, this is a solid movie. Jess and I have already watched this one before. We did it last year. Like I said, this was Jess's favorite of the 3 that we watched, being this, The Hill, and Network. Personally, Network is like...
You love Network.
I love the movie.
We're going to have to do it at some point.
We will
in
do it
full.
at some point. But I wanted to do this one because I knew that you weren't a big fan of Network.
I think I just watched it at a bad time.
Yeah, probably. And so I wanted to do this one to kind of show you a different range of Sidney Lumet's power as a director.
Yeah, and mission accomplished.
Yeah. That's actually something that I didn't note back in the effects and filming part is, did you notice like some of the cinematography of the film, like some of the camera shots or anything like that?
Nothing specific, no.
So inside the bank, they actually like all of that stuff inside of the bank was movable, like the walls and everything. So
Yeah,
they could
yeah.
move like walls around so that they could film like exactly the shot that they wanted. Because there's some shots inside the bank that I'm like, how are they getting into that position?
See, you know what? When it comes to score and cinematography, I'm kind of blind to both of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Those are like 2 of my highlights of movies often.
Okay, well, that's why we're a good match, because we notice different things.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking about this a little bit because it's such a good movie, but it's not... I would never put it in my top 10 list or even my top 20 list. For me, if I had to put a number on it, I would give it like a perfect 8 out of 10. Like, it's a good movie that I have no complaints about, but it would never be like, one of my favorites of all time. You
know what? I might give this like a 9 out of 10. This might, I don't know if it'd be in my top 20, but it'd be in my top 30.
Cool.
For sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Like,
yeah.
I remember doing this on the podcast last year and then talking to people about it leading up to the podcast, and nobody had heard of this movie. And I was like, this is a great movie.
Well, I think I told you before, like, I thought this movie was about Al Pacino coaching football or something. Dog Day Afternoon, right.
But yeah, no, I think that, like, the story is really interesting. It's a really great character study, and it's such an easy watch. Like I said, it's so funny and ridiculous, and it just holds up.
I think, like, especially as young writers, if you want to teach young writers about like how to build tension, I feel like you could show them this movie.
Cool.
Just be like, this is how to like really make your main character sweat.
Right.
Like, stuff like this.
Yeah. Just throw all the adversity at them.
Don't pull your punches, kids.
Right. Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. I think that's all that I want to talk about with Dog Day Afternoon. So on that note, I think next we're doing a war movie, Jason and I, and
then you and I are doing fantasy.
So you got to start thinking about what fantasy movie you want to watch.
Well, yeah, that's going to be a tough one because it's pre-2000 and you guys have already done Conan.
Yeah, we've done probably one of the better fantasies of pre-2000.
I would love to see like a cheesy 80s fantasy.
Okay, let's do it.
That doesn't hold up super well. If anyone has any recommendations.
Yeah. For sure.
Like you Beastmaster or something.
Yeah, I was thinking like Jason the Argonauts could be kind of interesting. There's Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, maybe. Something like that. Who knows?
There's some weird and interesting ones.
Listen,
we don't even have to go like fantasy, like sword and sandal fantasy either, right?
To all our younger listeners, pre-Lord of the Rings, the fantasy genre in film was a wild place.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was interesting to say the least. Like, never the highest budget, never the blockbuster movie of the summer kind of film. It was always like
The scrappy little movie that could.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Although I will say my favorite fantasy pre-2000s is probably The Dark Crystal.
You know what? I don't think I've seen it.
What?
With David Bowie?
No, you're thinking
I'm Labyrinth. Yeah.
Which I haven't seen Labyrinth, so that
I haven't seen
also is a
Labyrinth either.
possibility. No, The Dark Crystal is like a Jim Henson stop motion kind of film.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of it, but no, I've never seen it either.
Love it. Love
Okay.
it.
Well, we've got options.
Oh yeah, we've got plenty of options, but throw in recommendations. I'd love to hear them. Well, at this
You know
point in
who-
time, once this episode's out, Jason and I've already watched the war movie, so I got to start like prepping us 2 weeks,
Yeah.
2 movies ahead, so that people can actually give us recommendations.
You know who I would really like to hear recommendations from?
Your dad.
Your dad. If he's alive.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that dark note of deaths and fathers,
I've really run this joke into the ground.
you have. We're ending it now. Goodbye.
Goodbye.